There's a shift happening right now that most people don't want to talk about because it challenges everything we've been conditioned to believe about success, love, and what a man is supposed to do once he reaches the top. For decades, the script was simple: work hard, make money, build a career, and when you've made it, you settle down with a wife, buy a big house, and start a family. That was the reward, at least. That's what we were told. But more and more, the men who actually climbed that mountain, who put in the blood, sweat, and sleepless nights to reach the highest level of financial and personal success, are looking at that so-called reward and saying, no thanks. Not because they hate women, not because they can't find someone, but because they've finally seen the cost that comes with attaching their life's work, their legacy, and their freedom to a single person in a world where the rules of relationships have changed beyond recognition. They understand that the modern dating market is not built to reward loyalty, masculinity, or even provision. It's built on instant gratification, constant temptation, and the ruthless efficiency of hypergamy. The irony is that the very traits that make these men attractive in the first place, ambition, dominance, discipline, self-sufficiency, are the same traits that make them see through the illusion of happily ever after. They've experienced firsthand how quickly admiration can turn into entitlement, how initial respect can dissolve into subtle resentment once a woman feels she has secured the man. They've watched peers lose half their net worth, their homes, and their peace of mind in divorce courts that show no mercy to the man who brought in 90% of the resources, and they've learned, often by observing others, that no matter how generous, loyal, or loving you are, the moment a woman's emotional reality shifts, your years of sacrifice can be erased in her mind. To a man who has spent decades building something from scratch, that's not just risky, it's insanity. And so, the decision to stay single is not a rejection of intimacy. It's a strategic choice to protect the very life he worked so hard to create. We need to understand something here. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. A rich, successful man doesn't need to settle down for validation because he already has abundance in the areas that most men chase women for: purpose, status, freedom, and options. He's not lying awake at night wishing someone would love him for who he is, because he's seen how fleeting that kind of love can be in practice. He's not bitter, he's realistic. He knows that in today's culture, a man's commitment is often taken for granted, while a woman's is celebrated as rare and precious. He understands that once he signs legal papers, the relationship is no longer bound by desire, it's bound by obligation, and that shift changes everything. The spark that once drew her in isn't fueled by comfort and predictability, it's fueled by pursuit and uncertainty. And once she no longer has to work for his attention, once she feels she's already won, the very energy that attracted her begins to fade. For these men, staying single isn't about avoiding love, it's about keeping the right kind of love alive. They understand that passion thrives in space, in boundaries, in the mystery of not being fully accessible. When you live together, marry, or merge your entire lives, that natural tension dies unless both people are incredibly disciplined, and the truth is, most aren't. In a culture where female attention is constantly validated through social media, where strangers are just a DM away, the idea that one man's resources, attention, and commitment can hold a woman's focus for life without any decline is a romantic fantasy. High-value men don't gamble with fantasies, they deal in realities. And the reality is that their time, energy, and money are far too valuable to pour into a commitment that statistically has a greater chance of ending in betrayal or legal destruction than it does in lifelong devotion. Here's another truth. These men aren't lonely. In fact, they often have more companionship, intimacy, and adventure than most married men. But because they've built themselves into men of means, they have the ability to choose these experiences on their terms. They can travel where they want, when they want. They can date without the crushing pressure to lock something down for fear of missing their chance. They can walk away from drama without worrying about custody battles or losing their home. And perhaps most importantly, they can maintain their masculine frame without compromise. Because the moment a man's livelihood and life are legally tied to someone else's emotions, he no longer has full control. These men refuse to put themselves in a position where one person's change of heart can dismantle everything they've spent years building. And that, more than anything else, is why they stay single. Not out of bitterness, but out of a deep, unshakable commitment to self-preservation. The harsh reality these men understand, and what most younger guys only learn after being burned, is that marriage in the modern era isn't structured for mutual growth, it's structured for one-sided leverage. When a man is rich and successful, the leverage automatically shifts toward the woman, because she has both the emotional influence over him and the legal system behind her. And that's not paranoia, that's observable reality in countless cases. These men have seen their peers lose millions not because they were bad husbands, but because their wives got bored, felt unfulfilled, or convinced themselves they could do better. They've witnessed women turn the man who once provided her with everything into the villain in her story, simply to justify walking away with half his assets. When you've seen enough of that, you don't look at marriage as a romantic dream. You look at it as the riskiest business deal you could ever sign. One where the other party can breach the contract without consequence while you're still forced to pay the price. It's not that these men are incapable of love. They've often loved deeply before, but when you've loved and lost under conditions that strip you of both your dignity and your resources, the cost-benefit analysis changes forever. You begin to value peace over passion, independence over intimacy, and control over compromise. And in a world where women are conditioned to always aim higher and upgrade their options, a man who has already reached the top understands that there's nowhere higher for her to go except sideways toward novelty and excitement, even if it's with a man who's less capable. That's the irony most men miss. Once you've given her the best life possible, the only thing left that excites her is the thrill of something she hasn't experienced with you. And that thrill is rarely about love, it's about dopamine. Successful men see this pattern early and choose not to give anyone the power to destroy what they've built in pursuit of their next hit of emotional excitement. They also understand that the freedom they enjoy as single men is not something that can be easily replicated inside a committed marriage. Freedom is the ability to wake up and decide exactly how you will spend your day without factoring in someone else's mood, schedule, or expectations. It's being able to take a trip without a debate, to make a business move without checking in, to surround yourself with people who inspire you without worrying if your partner will feel insecure about it. Most men don't realize how much they give up in the name of companionship until they've already surrendered it. But these men, rich, powerful, and self-aware, know exactly what they'd be trading away, and they decide that no amount of traditional settling down is worth sacrificing the very thing that makes them feel alive: autonomy. Society will try to guilt these men into believing they're selfish for not giving a woman the security she deserves. But the truth is, security is a double-edged sword. For a man, giving it often means taking on all the risk, while the other person has the freedom to leave at will. The modern narrative tells men that true love is about selfless sacrifice, but the reality is, in most cases, that sacrifice is not reciprocated in the same way. Successful men know that their value doesn't increase by chaining themselves to one person. It's diminished if that person begins to take their presence for granted. And they've learned that the best way to keep a woman truly interested is not to give her everything up front, but to maintain the kind of life that constantly reminds her she has to earn her place in it. This isn't about being cold or unfeeling, it's about understanding female psychology. Women may say they want stability and predictability, but the truth is, what keeps them emotionally engaged is the feeling that they could lose you. When a man is rich and single, his very lifestyle creates that feeling naturally. Every time she sees that he can walk away, that other women desire him, that his attention is scarce, her attraction deepens. Put that same man in a marriage where she has legal and emotional security, and that edge is dulled, the challenge is gone, the chase is over. And for a woman whose attraction is fueled by uncertainty and desire, the absence of that dynamic slowly erodes her excitement. Successful men don't just know this, they live by it. And that's why they choose to keep themselves in a position where that dynamic never dies, even if it means never saying "I do." The backlash against men who openly choose to remain single, despite being wealthy and capable of supporting a family, is intense, and it comes from every angle. Women label them as commitment phobic or emotionally unavailable, while other men, often trapped in unhappy marriages, mask their envy with judgment, claiming these bachelors are missing out on real love. But here's the reality. Most of that criticism is projection. It's discomfort caused by watching someone reject the path they themselves followed, especially when that someone seems happier, freer, and more fulfilled than they are. Deep down, many married men envy the autonomy and control over time, money, and lifestyle that single successful men enjoy. They see the freedom to travel without permission, to invest without argument, to spend weekends in total peace without drama, and it makes them question the compromises they've made. For the women criticizing these men, the reaction often stems from frustration over lost opportunity. High-value, wealthy men are in extremely short supply, and women know this instinctively. A man who has resources, influence, and the self-discipline to stay in shape into his 40s, 50s, or beyond is a rare prize in the dating market. But when those men refuse to commit in the way women expect, through marriage and lifelong exclusivity, it forces women to compete harder for their attention without the security they crave. That competition creates resentment. They can't shame him with the usual "you'll be lonely" threat, because he's surrounded by options, friends, business allies, and often younger women who find his lifestyle intoxicating. So instead, they resort to attacking his character, hoping to undermine the very self-assurance that makes him so attractive in the first place. These men, however, are immune to public opinion because they operate from a position of abundance, not scarcity. They know that in the modern dating economy, their value appreciates with age, while the average woman's dating power peaks early and then steadily declines. This isn't arrogance, it's math. A 50-year-old wealthy man in great shape has more dating options than he did at 30. A 50-year-old woman, no matter how attractive, faces a smaller pool of eligible, high-value men willing to commit. Understanding this reality gives these men patience. They're in no rush to lock something in because they know their value isn't on a timer. In fact, they understand that waiting often works in their favor because their standards can remain high while their leverage only increases. What's even more powerful is the fact that these men don't need relationships to validate themselves. Most men who chase relationships do so because they're trying to fill a void, whether it's loneliness, insecurity, or the need for female approval. But a man who's built a life of purpose, achievement, and satisfaction doesn't approach women from a place of need. He approaches them from a place of choice. That changes everything. Women can feel when a man's interest is optional, not essential, and it shifts the entire dynamic. Instead of her holding the power to grant him intimacy, he holds the power to grant her access to his world, a world she knows she can't easily replace if she loses it. And that's the ultimate reason these men are so difficult to tie down. Once you've lived life on your own terms, once you've had the freedom to design every day exactly as you please, it's almost impossible to willingly give that up. These men don't need to imagine what marriage might take from them. They've watched it happen to others, and in many cases, they've experienced it firsthand. They've seen once ambitious men give up their hobbies, their friends, their dreams, and even their physical health under the weight of domestic obligations and marital tension. They've seen the way a man's sharp edges dull when his life becomes a routine of appeasement, compromise, and silent resentment, and they've decided, with absolute clarity, that no amount of romance or societal approval is worth trading the one thing they value above all else: control over their own lives. The thing most people misunderstand is that these men aren't anti-women. They enjoy women deeply. They enjoy dating, connection, intimacy, shared experiences, and even moments of romance. But they enjoy all of that without handing over the keys to their freedom. They have mastered the art of engaging without entangling, of giving enough to create attraction, but never so much that dependency forms on either side. They don't pretend to be monogamous if they're not, and they don't sell a future they have no intention of delivering. This honesty, paired with their unshakable independence, is paradoxically what makes women even more drawn to them. Because despite the frustration it causes, most women secretly crave a man who cannot be controlled. His autonomy is magnetic, even when it's maddening. This dynamic creates an environment where the women who enter their lives know they must perform to remain there. That doesn't mean acting fake. It means bringing their best self consistently, because these men have options and will not hesitate to walk away from complacency. In a committed, traditional relationship, women often relax into the safety of knowing a man is locked in. But with these men, that lock never clicks shut. They keep the door open just enough for her to feel both wanted and replaceable at the same time. This constant awareness triggers a deeper level of effort. How she dresses, how she behaves, how she speaks to him, because she knows any lapse could result in being quietly replaced without drama. And ironically, this is the very tension that keeps attraction alive for years instead of months. Financial power amplifies this effect in ways most men can't imagine. When a man can take a woman to an exotic location on a whim, introduce her to circles of influence, or open doors to experiences she's never dreamed of, her attachment forms quickly. But when that same man shows her subtly that all of this access is conditional, not based on cruelty, but on mutual respect. Her emotional investment skyrockets. She's not just drawn to the man, she's drawn to the lifestyle that only exists because of him. And because she understands it's his discipline, focus, and independence that sustain that lifestyle, she doesn't push as hard for control. She knows that by trying to domesticate him, she risks killing the very energy that makes him and the life around him so irresistible. These men also understand the psychological principle of intermittent reinforcement, whether consciously or instinctively. They don't give constant attention or predictable responses. Some days they're fully engaged, charming, attentive, and generous. Other days they're focused on their own pursuits, leaving her to wonder what he's doing and why she's not part of it. This unpredictability isn't about playing games, it's about living a life where a woman is part of the story, but never the entire story. And in doing so, they replicate the same thrill women feel in the early stages of dating, over and over again, without ever losing themselves in the process. Most men fail here because they confuse consistency with security, not realizing that for attraction to remain high, a woman must always feel a subtle edge of uncertainty. What cements their power in this dynamic is that they could walk away at any moment, and both parties know it. For the woman, this awareness keeps her invested, because, unlike most men, he's not bluffing. If she crosses certain boundaries, disrespects him, or tries to strip away his autonomy, he will disappear without a fight. For him, that ability to walk away is the ultimate safeguard. It prevents resentment, prevents emotional hostage situations, and ensures that every interaction remains voluntary on both sides. And because he operates from a position of choice rather than necessity, he maintains not only his freedom, but also the constant flow of feminine energy in his life, without ever being trapped by it. That, more than anything, is why these men remain desirable far beyond their prime dating years, because they are living proof that you can have women, wealth, and freedom all at once if you have the discipline never to hand over control. Over time, society's reaction to these men only intensifies. In their 20s and 30s, they might be dismissed as players or commitment phobes, but once they hit their 40s, 50s, and beyond, and are still living a life of choice, traveling where they want, dating women decades younger, and staying in peak physical and financial shape, the criticism takes on a sharper, almost desperate tone. People begin to invent narratives to explain why they must be secretly unhappy, because admitting that a man can be this content without a wife or kids challenges one of society's deepest myths, that fulfillment comes only through traditional family structures. This narrative isn't just about personal opinion, it's about protecting the illusion for those who already gave up their freedom. Watching someone thrive outside the system forces people to confront the uncomfortable possibility that they might have trapped themselves. For the women who've been with these men but didn't secure them, the stories become even more emotional. They'll tell friends that he was emotionally unavailable, or that he was afraid of commitment, or that he was selfish. What they won't admit is how intoxicating it felt to be around him, how they thought about him long after things ended, and how even while criticizing him, they would still answer his text instantly if he reached out. That's because these men leave a mark that can't be erased. They're not just another chapter in a woman's dating history, they're the exception. They're the one she remembers, not because of what he gave her, but because of the way he made her feel, alive, desired, and constantly challenged to rise to his level. The irony is that these men often have better relationships with women than most committed men do. Without the constant battles over bills, household responsibilities, in-laws, and future plans, the time they spend together is pure. It's focused on shared experiences, attraction, and presence in the moment, not on managing each other's lives. This keeps the spark alive naturally, without needing date nights scheduled months in advance or forced romantic gestures to keep things fresh. Because there's no contract binding them, every moment feels chosen, not obligatory. And that choice, repeated over and over, is what makes women feel truly desired, far more than any legal document ever could. As these men age, their lifestyle only becomes more appealing. While many of their peers are dealing with midlife crises, financial strain, and strained marriages, they are building wealth, expanding their networks, and maintaining their physical health. They don't dread aging, they use it to their advantage. Their gray hair becomes distinguished, their experience adds depth to conversation, and their confidence is no longer something they try to project. It's simply who they are. And because they're not tied down, they can pivot in life instantly. They can move to another city, buy property in another country, or change careers without needing permission, or dealing with emotional resistance from a partner who doesn't share their vision. The final truth about these men is this: they've cracked the code on the balance between desire and freedom. They've learned that women are most drawn to men who choose them, not men who need them. They've realized that relationships work best when both people know they're together because they want to be, not because they're trapped. And they've embraced the fact that in today's world, a man who has his finances, health, and emotional independence handled will never be short of romantic opportunities at any age. They don't hate marriage, and they don't hate women. They simply refuse to give up the one thing that makes all of it possible: control over their own lives. That's why they stay single. That's why they remain in demand, and that's why they will still be desired long after most men have faded from the dating market.